Alright, we got more preseason to get to, some roster and game predictions. We'll take a quick peek at the Upshot League and check in on Natasha Cloud. Now, for the most part, the international games aren't too much to scout, but the Aces are an interesting team because Becky Hammon has the most say-so in her roster. But along with being a preseason game, it's also a game where they're playing the Japanese national team. So of course we didn't get any action from Asia Wilson. Dana Evans is still recovering and or resting, but we did get to see the likes of Chelsea Gray, Jewel Lloyd, Jackie Young, Nalissa Smith, Kirsten Bell, Kennedy Carter, and their draftees. And so just like the other teams, you got your starters, but they played a little bit more than half the game. Becky was just letting them run, to be honest with you. Putting whoever she was looking at on the floor and just seeing what was going to happen. Chelsea Gray immediately was doing Chelsea Gray things. No shocker there. She gave you 16 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds. You got okay action from Jewel Lloyd. There was some trampling there when she went down against the other team, so hopefully they get her rested. Jackie Young gave you 17 points, so she was ready and raring to go, along with 3 steals, so hopefully that's an indicator of her season to come. Now, off the bench, they obviously gave a lot of run time to Kirsten Bell. They keep her around. We usually see her later in the season, rarely in the playoffs, but she's a player who had a decent offseason with Athletes Unlimited, so maybe they give her more to do this season. It was really good to see Kennedy Carter back on the floor, and again, this was where you really saw Becky just let them go loose. Carter was able to get 18 points off the bench. She did play 20 minutes. She was letting loose, getting into the paint, kicking out when she needed to, finishing when she needed to. So she made a great case for herself to stay on the team. Again, they don't really have to make cuts on the Aces, but obviously they can. Kennedy Carter specifically is on a training camp contract, but I think you got really good playing time from her and Janiyah Barker. Now, Barker did go down, again, another collision of sorts, and she was out of the game after that. But to be such a high projected pick the year before she actually declared for the draft, this is kind of a sneaky steal for the Aces. She's young, 6'4". Just watching her, she's got a good feel for the game. This is one of those situations where you kind of feel bad for the player because they may get lost in the shuffle without a breakout moment or breakout game. If teams don't see value in her and she gets cut, this could be another, Charlie Collier situation. Obviously not the number 1 pick, but you can tell she just has a lot of talent, and hopefully she gets to show that even if it's not on the Aces. It was still a pretty fun game. The Japanese team were going off on the Aces, especially in that first quarter. But once the refs slowed it down, it started to become the blowout everyone expected it to be. But they were firing off threes and at least showing why they were the national team. So it was fun to watch in that regard. But the Aces look interesting. Again, a team that didn't really change a lot. So it'll be fun to see how they fare against the other teams that have went through minor, if not major changes. Alright, and then looking at the upcoming preseason games, couple of funny matchups, honestly. You got Connecticut going against Toronto, Atlanta going against Chicago, the Portland Fire going against the Seattle Storm, and the Phoenix Mercury going up against the Japanese national team. Now, looking at the Connecticut and Toronto game, this will be the first time the Toronto Tempo take the floor, so I do expect to see Marina Mabrey, Brittany Sykes, Izzy Harrison, Lexi Held, Julie Almond, Timmy Fagbenle. Even if it's not for too long, it's the franchise first game. None of these players are injured or hurt, at least as of right now. And they usually don't play the full game anyway, so I do expect to see the other training camp contracts take the floor. The Tempo do have another preseason game against Minnesota, so they have a little bit of runway here, but it's not a lot for an expansion team, on top of the fact that they have a lot of training camp contracts. So there will be cuts out of Toronto. They need this time to get on the floor, see who they want to keep, different pairings, and again, they don't have a lot of games to do that. Alright, then when you look at Connecticut, again, not a team with a lot of injuries, and as much as they have a lot of training camp contracts, I'm not sure they're too torn up on who they're going to keep. So outside of your Aaliyah Edwards, Brittany Griner, Sanaya Rivers, Diamond Miller, because I do believe they'll hold on to her, you're going to see their draftees But this is also a team who picked up a couple of players that were not drafted. So you may see Reagan Beers out there with Anel Angloma, Gianna Neepkins, Taylor Bigby, on top of still needing to evaluate Shea Petty, Lila Lakin. They did exercise their option on Aaliyah Edwards, so we know they're keeping her, so she might just rest. But by the third or fourth quarter of this game, we won't have starters. Both of these teams have benches and development players to evaluate at this point. Way too many for us to see the starters for too long. Just remembering how the Fever beat the Liberty in that first quarter, I think the Tempo will do the same thing with Connecticut here, have a little firepower out the gate, and then they'll just play it out after that. Alright, and then after that, of course, we have the fun one, the Atlanta Dream versus the Chicago Sky. Now, who knows who's actually going to take the floor? This is a preseason game, but I suspect we'll see Angel Reese, even if it's just for, that first quarter. We'll see our starters, Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard, Jordan Canada, Brianna Jones, and Angel Reese. Now, Atlanta is another team that has some early draft picks, so we'll probably see their draftees take the floor, but this will be the most exciting part of their night. They don't have as many cuts as other teams, but enough to make it game worthy and put these players in the game. I'm sure we'll see Taylor Theory take the floor. Interested to see how they fix that number situation. Right now, they're both showing number 5 still. We should see Sika Kone, Stephanie Jones, mainly because they need to make those decisions and figure out who their second string is. After losing Brittany Griner, there is kind of a position there to fill with their center, even with Brianna Jones being your main starter. And they'll be going up against the new look Chicago team, but some of these newer faces are still either recovering from injury or resting. Specifically your Dejanay Carrington, but we might see Skylar Diggins. They still have Rachel Bannum, Camila Cardoso, we'll see Rakia Jackson, Haley Van Lith, and JC Sheldon. Now, I think after that game with Phoenix, they did get to see a lot from Haley Van Lith having a hell of a second half. So for a team with multiple preseason games, I think this is a good run to see the rest of the young players draft these players that weren't drafted. I'll be interested to see if they play their young players more, though. I mean, obviously, you want Rakia Jackson to get some run time, but Chicago made some pretty heavy offseason moves. So to be in win now mode, I definitely expect to start seeing some cuts from this team. And then looking at the overall with Atlanta and Chicago, I just have to give it to Atlanta again because I feel like they'll have their starters during that first and second quarter. And Chicago is still dealing with injuries and rest time. They're just not at full strength, even in this preseason game. So I got to give it to Atlanta. All right, and then we get on to the Seattle Storm versus the Portland Fire. Now, this will be the first time we see the Portland Fire take the floor, but we won't see Nika Mule or Carly Samuelson. Now, we should see Sarah Ashley Barker, Chloe Bibby, Maya Caldwell, Bridget Carlton, Emily Inksler, Louisa Geiselsolder, Meg Gustafson, and Shug Sutton. Now, as far as the expansion teams, I do think the Tempo did better than the Fire as far as building out a roster with a 1-2 punch. The Fire are alright. It's a pretty okay team, but it's definitely role players. No one jumps off the page being the main star of the Fire. Now, like a lot of teams, they'll still be throwing out players on training camp contracts and evaluating to see who they want to keep. But at the same time, similar to the Tempo, they have to play the players they know they're going to keep. See how they match on the floor. It's not a lot of runway in preseason, but you have to take the time you can get. Now, if they get Nika Mule out of this situation, I think they have a brighter future, but that's yet to be determined. And I know they picked up Bridget Carlton as their free agent. I'm just not sure how this is the player you build around. Where at least, again, with the Tempo, you can see the direction they were leaning with, picking up Marina Mabry, picking up Brittany Sykes. So the Fire just may have a harder run at it, especially during these early years. And after looking at all that, I mean, I have to give it to Seattle. I do think both teams will come out with something to prove. Again, they have a lot of players trying to make the roster, but Portland just doesn't seem to fit yet, or at least I can't see it. So I'll be trying to pay close attention and take notes when they take the floor, even if it's training camp players, because it'll tell us a lot about what this team is trying to do moving forward. And then after that, we'll see the Mercury take on the Japanese national team. So it'll be similar to these other games where they're playing international teams. even if it's not a blowout, it's just an exhibition game, so it's really just to see who can get up and down the floor. We may not even see all of our starters for this particular game. And considering Phoenix does have a lot of training camp contracts, a lot of cuts to make, but it's not heartbreaking decisions. I mean, you pretty much know they're going to keep DeWanna Bonner, Alyssa Thomas, Monique McConney, Natasha Mack, Kalia Copper. They're given a chance to Kara Dunn, Maggie Dugan, so hopefully they get to see the floor, but I just don't see them taking big swings or making huge decisions based on these international games, unless you catch fire or something. And then, so just knowing that, I have to give it to Phoenix. So it'll be another interesting round of preseason games, to say the least. Alright, and then just quickly looking at the Upshot League, they're actually set to debut in May. A pretty impressive backing in this league. It's pretty much set to be like a G League, a developmental league going into the pros. Obviously, most notably the WNBA, but really just getting them prepared for the pros, international leagues, and even just in the Upshot League, because they will be getting paid. But I think the reason this makes the news is by signing someone like Cheyenne Sellers. Not that their other players don't have a name, especially in the NCAA space, but she's bounced around enough at this point in the W for this to be news. I think this is a big enough name for this type of league, a development league. Any recognizable names are going to be good in this sense. Again, especially on top of having so many recognizable names behind them. Cheryl Miller was an early part of this league, and Drysdale, Tamika Catchings, Taj McWilliams Franklin. And so outside of those names, being able to pick up players that didn't get drafted last year and this year. So the league is small, but they have their starting 4 teams: the Charlotte Crown, the Savannah Steel, the Greensboro Groove, and the Jacksonville Waves. Now, Sellers is going to play for the Waves, and just looking at where they're all located, they will play like a small league, kind of traveling between the different locations. And it's most impressive because the Groove will actually play where the Greensboro Swarm play, the G League affiliate for the Charlotte Hornets. So they are very closely related here, and it's actually a great place to be if you weren't picked up or if you're bouncing around. Again, someone like Charlie Collier, a #1 pick that's out of the league, would have thrived here, because once you start televising these games or selling tickets to these games, they're there for the basketball, but the big names will put butts in seats. So I'm excited to see what it looks like. Again, it's a development league, so we'll see where they make little changes and tweaks. Alright, and then lastly, we're just checking back in with Natasha Cloud. Now, it popped back up because Annie Constable reported that multiple sources are saying Natasha Cloud is not being blackballed because of her activism. Now, right under that, Isabel Harrison, Cloud's longtime partner here, just said this isn't true. So on some level, something else is going on here. Now, she's only made a couple of statements. The last one saying she's put in the work, and going into year 11, she knows her worth. I mean, even outside of the W, she helped start Athletes Unlimited. She's an active part of Unrivaled, and she is pretty outspoken on her social media and in her social space. But from a basketball standpoint, she's one of the few true point guards in the league. On top of being a WNBA champion, she's highly touted defensively and spoken highly of by her teammates. And for such a veteran, the top team that comes to mind is a team like Seattle, who's already shown they need a point guard. They do have Natisha Heidemann, but she's more of a 2 guard. And just looking at the tough decisions they'll have to make, they need a guard. You do have teams with space to give her a vet minimum contract. Now, I don't know how many years she's looking for. That could have been something else that held them up again. Tiffany Hayes comes to mind. But for a league that's somewhat trying to get younger, especially with the influx of international players, veterans are essential, especially for a Storm team that just lost their core 3, or even a team like the Mystics that just needs guards. I'm not saying these are perfect fits, but it's just crazy that she's not signed, even on a 1-year deal. Now, because someone like Tina Charles still isn't signed, I won't fully say she's being blackballed, but I do think that has something to do with it when multiple teams look like they need someone at the guard position. Hopefully we see her signed to a team this season.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, players.